I mean, I don't know if people need to know type in order to have a good relationship, obviously, but it's certainly,
yeah, 100%.
And if
the
you
whole
don't,
world,
if
they
you
need to
don't know
learn it
type.
from us.
That's right. And yeah, that's right. Just assume your relationship is just going to
It'll be terrible. It's like you
crash
get
and
an owner's
burn.
manual for your personality type. Go get couples mapping, or your relationship will be destroyed forever.
Forever, it's doomed. You don't have to know a type in order to have a good relationship, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So I was on a call with a client earlier this week, time of this recording, and we were just talking about him possibly joining our Personality Life Path mentorship program. So I was talking about our program and going through all of that. And he just said, hey, I've got a side question for you. This is a marriage question. I said, okay, hit me. What's the marriage question? And he said, you and Antonia have very similar personality types. You're an ENFP in the Myers-Briggs system. Antonia's an ENTP. So I imagine the two of you pretty much just get along about everything because you are almost the exact same type. You have one letter off. Antonia's a thinker. You're a feeler. And, I imagine that you guys just have a really wonderful, smooth time of it in your relationship. And I thought for a second, I think we do have a high functioning relationship. I think we're able to overcome conflict at high levels pretty well. But I reflected on him. I said, no, every couple has issues and challenges and struggles and things that they, have conflict around. And myself and Antonia be the same. He said, but you share the same driver of extrovert intuition, or what we call exploration. So, like you would see things the same and you would and I said, yeah, actually we do have a very similar worldview. We do agree that what we're looking at is often the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily always lead to agreements about what to do about that because we have different judgments about it. But even when we're looking at it, sometimes we approach it a little differently. If we're agreeing we're looking at the same thing, we're standing at different angles looking at it. And that can cause conflict because we don't always agree on how we should be looking at the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think today we could unpack a little bit about this idea of, even if people share something, like you and I share a dominant driver cognitive function in our personalities, it doesn't necessarily just mean we're going to have an easy time of getting along and seeing everything eye to eye. In fact, and we're going to talk about this today, it actually might be even tougher than if we had a different viewpoint in our driver.
Yep. Yeah. There's no relationship is easy. Some relationships are really hard. Some relationships are harder than others. Some relationships are impossible. I don't think any relationship is easy, right? Or doesn't have its challenges. Because it's like when I think about my relationship to myself, that's not easy either, right? I'm with myself all the time. And sometimes I really like that person, and other times I hate that person. And so the same dynamic, sort of rolls out to your life partner.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're going to love that person, sometimes you're going to hate them. And I think when it comes to, we talked on the last podcast about, well, what do you do when you feel like you're the one who's doing all the work in a relationship? And for most people, I don't know if everybody feels that way, but I think for most people, we recognize that our partner is trying.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know if we'd stick around. I think if I was in a relationship with somebody who just wasn't like legit trying at all, I don't know if I could hang. I don't know if I could be there long term. But I don't know if I've ever been in a relationship where the person was doing like no attempt. Yeah, no attempt at all, not trying to pour anything in. And that includes some of my worst relationships. Does that make sense? It's like even the ones that weren't that great, I know the other person was at least trying. So when you run into conflict or you have challenges and the other person is trying, then it's not a matter of saying, well, it's all your fault and that's the problem, or it's all my fault and that's the problem. You have to have a little bit finer touch. You have to go in there and go, okay, actually, what is the problem? And how people talk about, most things are a systems problem, not a people problem. Like most challenges are because of how a system is set up, not because the players have poor intent.
Yeah.
I would say that same principle applies to pair bonds. Most of the time, it's a system problem. And by system, I mean, if we see ourselves as a system, And type is excellent at breaking us down into a manageable system that helps us figure out what's going on for us, how we're pre-wired. It doesn't explain everything, and nor should it, right? We shouldn't use it that way.
Yeah.
But it does help put language to things that are otherwise unconscious. And it does allow us to see ourselves in terms of a system running. And so if most things are not a quote unquote people problem, as in we're intentionally infusing bad things into the relationship, if they're a system problem, then I think one of the most powerful uses of type is to understand what's going on in the system when the system is experiencing conflict, when it's experiencing a grinding of the gears, so to speak.
I think this is why, like I mentioned, life path mentorship, personality life path mentorship earlier in the episode. That's basically what we do in that program. We look at all the 8 cognitive functions and we create a systems map for somebody's life and your relationship to all these areas. Because I think when you break something apart like that in a system, you actually know what's going on. You can influence it. Just imagine breaking a car engine apart when a car's not working. You can find the part that doesn't work. You fix it, put the engine back together. Now it works. It's kind of the same thing as we're doing in our personalities. And so this systems approach to the person and then the person you're in a relationship with, they have their own system running. And then the relationship is like an overlay of both of those systems, and it creates its own systems, right? Its own emergence and system that's running.
Yeah.
And so what I hear you saying is how those are set up, like how the agreements, whether spoken or unspoken, the habits, the conditions, the environment, all those things are going to influence the results you get in your relationship. So that's a lot to unpack. We can't do all of that on this episode. So we're going to zoom in on some parts of that system today and talk about how. Well, I think what we want to do here is we want to introduce some of the archetypical energy that your cognitive functions and your personality are associated with. Now, again, in our personality life path mentorship, we go really deep into this, right? We spend weeks at this. We can't do that today. We're going to give you a cursory overview of some of the energies you're carrying, whether you know it or not, unconsciously in your personality. And those energies are flavored. We all have them. Like we all have a heroic part of ourselves, for example. But it's flavored by our personality type, how that heroism shows up in the world. And so there's like an alchemical merging of like an energy that we carry in a general way. And then the quality of that energy gets flavored by how we're wired individually. And again, we spent an entire program on that, but let's do our best today to give somebody something they can take away if they're listening or watching about this, that they could maybe apply to their relationship right away this week.
Well, in speaking to those energies, I think that the 2 elements we bring into relationships in terms of the system of our personality are our assumptions and our expectations.
Yeah.
And in fact, in our series, our what we call our self-love series, where we're talking about our relationship to ourselves, the key underlying principle we kept returning to was, what are our expectations for ourselves? Like what do we expect out of ourselves that maybe we can't reach or probably shouldn't expect ourselves to reach, and so we experience disappointment? What expectations are too low, right? And so we're not meeting a higher expectation for ourselves, which would create self-confidence. So expectations are pretty powerful, right?
Yes.
And when we bring expectations into our relationship with ourselves, we see how it really impacts how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
The same thing is going to apply to a relationship with another person. The expectations we're bringing in are pretty big.
Yeah, I want to go a little deeper into that just for a moment. It's going to sideline the conversation just for a second, topically.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll come back to the main framework here. But I just want to highlight that to say, 30 to 50 years ago, when a couple got together, at least here in the United States and the West, there were societal expectations for that couple that were very clear to everybody, both parties of that couple, society at large, the church they attended or community they were involved with, or the families they came from. Everybody had the same picture and image in their mind of what those expectations looked like, right? That's where we get the 1950s housewife staying at home with the kids cleaning, and the man with the briefcase with the nice business suit on the train going to New York City to work the day job, right? There's like this archetype that you see. And there's challenges to this, right? It limited people to live the lives that they wanted to live. So that was the challenge in that framework, is that all these expectations that were agreed to in society and culture prevented people from their individuality and sovereignty when they wanted to often. Like a woman.
Too cookie cutter.
Yes. A woman in 1955 didn't have a lot of options,
Mhm.
as many options as she has today. And so I think that humanity has progressed and we've given people more freedom and options, and we don't have writ large top-down expectations put on people in how they couple up, what they have to do, kids, all of this stuff. The challenge with this now, though, is when you don't have any expectations, you have to, as a couple, create your own every single time you partnership. Like every time you partner or come together, society, it doesn't have anything preloaded. But a lot of people are operating assuming there's a preloaded expectation or assumption of what a relationship would. But are we certain we're all seeing those the same? Because there's a bunch of different ones now in culture and society. So when a couple gets together, they basically have to create a compact, an agreement to say, here are my assumptions, here are my expectations. And no one does that.
Yeah.
Unless they go to like marriage counseling or something, which very rare, like happens much anymore outside of like religious frameworks or those kinds of things. So we've got people getting together, coupling up, partnering up. They don't have clear expectations of each other. They have assumed expectations and assumptions. And now they're upset and frustrated that we're not meeting each other's expectations, but they were never talked about. We just assumed them all.
Yeah.
And that worked 50 years ago to assume them because everybody was in on the same framework.
Yeah.
Right? When I say it worked, I'm saying it functioned. A lot of people were unhappy, but society kind of carried along, and at least you knew what the quote unquote rules were in a relation dynamic.
Yeah. Well,
even if you didn't like those rules, at least they were clear and everybody could kind of like have a guide, like a guardrail for it.
Well, what's the phrase? You never solve problems, you just trade them.
Yes.
So there were clear problems in this idea that everybody's relationship had to look the same.
Yeah.
But once those expectations were removed in order to account for individuality and individual preferences, now we've traded the problem of now, like you mentioned, people's expectations are very individualized, and who knows where they were born. Yeah. And then they bring them in without making it clear.
So one could say we're screwed. Like relationships are screwed. We're in big trouble.
Right.
No one's ever going to be able to have a satisfying relationship except you and I know, Antonia, there's this thing called type, personality type, that does give us at least a ballast of relationship for ourselves in a sovereign way, right? We understand ourselves. We can understand the relationship with ourselves. And we have some frameworks now and tools with personality types and the archetypes and all of these things. Oh, wait. So now if I am required, or not required, but if I have the opportunity to talk with a partner and create those expectations assumptions, we have a ballast and we have a tool to do it with personality type.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to sideline to say all of that. I think that's the reason why we're talking about this today is because it's needed now more than ever in the grand scheme of relationships writ large.
Yeah. Well, that actually, what you just mentioned, when I said assumptions and expectations, I think you were talking about something a little different, but I think they're just layers of them. Okay. Like the expectations you're talking about are the expectation for what a relationship is going to be just in general. Yeah. And I do think that we still look to the outside world to frame our expectations. We just don't have as much of a control.
There's a lot of options out there.
Yeah. Well, and we're no longer in a modernist time period where things are very, in a modernist time period, there's like one answer to the question.
3 TV channels, one answer.
That's right.
It.
One news channel, one set of encyclopedias. We're now in a very postmodern time period where there's literally endless amounts of options in every possible, in every possible topic. There's an endless variety of ways you can go about it. Yeah. And so there's benefit that comes with that, but there's also added challenge that goes with that. So the benefit is that you can model your relationship as you choose. And, you can see this. There's a rise right now of more traditional relationships. And I don't think that that's just in religious circles. I think that that's just like people are kind of tired of having to invent everything from scratch.
They want a template.
Yeah. So they're kind of going back to some templates, and there is advantages to that because I think it was a template to begin with for a reason. I think templates are usually created when they suit the largest percentage of people.
You and I have templates.
That's right.
I mean, you mentioned our tertiary or 10-year-old earlier. You have extroverted feeling or harmony. I have extroverted thinking or effectiveness. I tend to be the one that takes the trash out and does like the household stuff, like the fixer-up stuff.
Well, you pay the bills and I do the cooking. Yeah. It's very traditional.
And so, we just kind of traditionally follow it. And I kind of happy with that. At least on my part, you may be unhappy doing the cooking. I like your cooking better than my cooking. So
I like my cooking better than yours. I hate paying bills. I'm super happy to not have to take trash out. Like, it's all fine.
Yeah.
Now, we're not entirely traditional. I mean,
you did fix the garbage disposal using ChatGPT or Perplexity or something.
Perplexity, that's right. I'm the one who usually does
proud of you.
The DIY projects, right? I'm the one who's usually fixing stuff with
TI tinkerer.
Yeah, with tools. But that's okay. I mean, there's nothing to say that you can't, go outside of whatever the script is, even if you prefer a script. I wouldn't say we're exactly traditional, but I would say that we definitely have found our niche.
Yeah.
And we did bring in pretty traditional expectations from our upbringing, but with a twist, I think. I think we definitely have it with a twist. And that's what's nice about not being forced into more traditional roles, is that there's more modification without the fear of judgment that other people are. I mean, the judgment from the outside world into your relationship only matters if they're going to meddle.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't care what people think about our relationship but in those time periods, how society thought about you also determined what level of meddling they were going to do.
Well, in some ways you wanted meddling because, like, when the going got tough, your families were all there at the wedding and they were all supportive of this union between two people.
That's true.
You kind of want them to go, no, stick with this.
Meddling came with support.
Like, work through it. Like, don't just give up. Like, I mean, obviously with health and, like, you're not getting hurt or abused or something really bad's happening. I'm just talking about getting along, in a general way. Your family would often, like, support that and they'd want to see it. You made a commitment. You're kind of held accountable by all these people you committed formally in public to.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't have that as much. People aren't doing formal accountability marriage ceremonies as much anymore. They're coupling up, but there's no, like, moment where they say, no, we're going to publicly declare that we're committing to each other around something.
Yeah.
I think there's a power in that. And it again, you don't have to do it, but it certainly does create now that support and that accountability for your relationship.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, you don't solve problems, you just trade them. So if you don't have that kind of system set up,
everybody does.
I don't have a lot of meddling from anybody in my life, but I also don't have a lot of support.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They don't bother you either way.
Don't bother me either way. So yeah, there is that. So there's the top level expectations that we bring into a relationship that are oftentimes not talked about anymore.
Yeah.
Probably because we assume other people have the same expectations in their head, even if we're not in a modernist time period. Like, what most of us have been crafted and fashioned at this point, not by societal templates and structures, which have their purpose. I mean, I think I know that in the past, I talked a lot of crap about templates. You don't want to live a templatized life. You want to live outside of that. And now I'm kind of, I mean, maybe it's because I'm integrating my introverted sensing or memory function a lot more, but I see the value in templates. I don't think everybody should have to live according to a template. And I don't think it suits everyone. And I think people should be given permission to live outside of them. I don't think we should have, like, this strangling cultural expectation that everybody will live just so. But there's a value to having a template. And one of them is we are less influenced by creative media.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of expectations are now set based on
what's possible.
Yeah. And a bit of fantasy.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're given love stories and we're given happily ever afters. And even in this more postmodern time period where we don't have as traditional happily ever after stories, we still have a lot of, there's an insinuation that things are easier than they actually are going to be, which we talked a little bit about in the last episode too. So there's something to be said for having direct conversations around what your expectations for relationships are just in general.
Yeah. So we went from, the metaphor could be templates. We had these, like, a PDF you can't edit, at least not easily.
Right.
And so we used to have PDF versions of, like, relationships. You couldn't edit it. You couldn't change it. It was like that. You handed it, like, do the relationship this way. This is the only option. Like, maybe 2 options. That's it. And then we went from there, and what I hear you say, it's like we're now blank page syndrome. It's like we're just like, hey, there's a blank page, make the relationship anything you want. Well, what about an editable Word or Google Doc, right? That we all share as a couple of relationship. It has a template, but you can edit it and make it your own. But you start from some framework or some basis of something.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you're positing.
Well, but nobody's going to give it to you, at least at this time period in history.
Hunt for it.
In this culture.
Yeah.
In this culture, you may or may not be given one of those. And so you're going to have to make it yourself. Yeah. This is a bit of a tangent from the direction I was originally going to go. Let me know when you feel complete on it.
Let's go back to that here,
Okay.
and let's get back into some of the stuff we wanted to talk about.
Well, but I think it sets up a good frame for what we're talking about when we say you should have communication around expectations. What we just mentioned, I think most people would say, yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's reasonable to talk about what I'm expecting out of a relationship and to figure out whether or not you want to live up to your partner's expectations, because they might not be reasonable, at least for you. Like you might say, yeah, that's not a thing I can do. And so that needs to be known as soon as possible. Okay, so those are, I would say, more conscious top level expectations.
Yeah.
And the direction that we'll go in this podcast now towards archetypes are the unspoken, probably unconscious expectations and assumptions we bring in based on the system of our personality. So before you mentioned, it's like, we're screwed, but here we have type and type will help us out. I mean, I don't know if people need to know type in order to have a good relationship, obviously, but it certainly,
they do. 100%.
And if
the
you
whole
don't,
world,
if
they
you
need to
don't know
learn it
type.
from us.
That's right. And yeah, that's right. Just assume your relationship is just going to
It'll be terrible. It's like you
crash
get
and
an owner's
burn.
manual for your personality type. Go get couples mapping, or your relationship will be destroyed forever.
Forever. It's doomed. You don't have to know a type in order to have a good relationship, but it certainly doesn't hurt,
Yeah.
right? And it definitely assists when we're trying to figure out where some of the strain comes in. So the direction that I think we should go is to first talk about the archetypal energies. You mentioned it before, these energies that we carry in, that we all have, the archetypal energies of our first 4 functions and how that influences our relationships. And then I also want to hearken to Dr. John Beebe's idea, this concept of the axis of relating to self versus the axis of relating to others. So John is he's a coach of ours. I'm at this point, I put him in the pantheon of mentors that have
a friend at this point.
Yeah, I would say.
I think we're friends. I don't think he's just our coach. I think we're friends
coach,
with
mentor,
John.
friends. But I think of him as one of my mentors that really helped me unlock the true power that lives underneath functions and type. I always kind of knew it, but then, I mean, I kind of had a sense of it. And then I don't know, John just pushed like the right button and I was like, okay, I get it.
It was working with him personally.
Mhm.
His books are great, but when you work with him personally, he's really good in person, landing some of these concepts in a personal way,
For
in
sure.
a real way.
Yeah, at least he has been for me. So I want to hearken to John's concept of the axis of relating to self versus the axis of relating to others. And actually, I just talked about this in the personality dynamics course that I taught yesterday, which is designed. It's a course for coaches and therapists to use type to help diagnose some of the complexes that they're the people they're working with, their clients are going through. And as we were discussing this concept of the axis of relating to self versus the axis of relating to others, like so many light bulbs were going off, so many ahas. So I thought it would be good to at least give it a nod in this podcast, because I think it helps with this idea of the expectations and assumptions we're bringing into everything.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the first thing is I want to harken back, and I know that we've done entire podcasts about this. So, and I don't remember the top or the exact title, but it's like the archetypes of personality. And this also comes from Dr. John Beebe. And John talks about how all 8 of the functions have an archetypal energy associated with them. But I think we should just stick with the first 4, because I think it's the most powerful in terms of being aware of what we're bringing in and why we might be butting heads in a more conscious way. The 4 shadow functions definitely come up in relationships. Definitely. In fact, they probably come up in relationships more than any other time, since relationships are so triggering and point to those elements. But they're also murkier. They're harder to describe, and you kind of have to be in the action in order to really know what's going on there.
Yeah.
So let's just stick with the first 4 and do some top level principles around how to use an understanding and awareness of these archetypes and how they play out in our relationships. So the first 4 archetypes are hero, parent, eternal child, and what's called the anima or the animus. And these relate to the first 4 cognitive functions. In the CAR model, you could say that the hero archetype is associated with the driver function, or the dominant in technical terms. The parent energy is associated with the auxiliary function, or what we call the co-pilot. The eternal child energy is associated with the 10-year-old, or what's called the tertiary. And the anima or animus is related to the inferior function, or what we call the 3-year-old. The other element that I want to lay down a track for right now, which we'll talk about a little later, is the first and fourth function. So that would be your driver, 3-year-old, or your dominant and inferior. These create what's called a polarity, which we've also done episodes on before, which means that they form a relationship where they actually cannot be separated. So while we talk about the 8 cognitive functions, the 8 Jungian functions, as separate from each other, the reality is that they have a polarity relationship.
Come in pairs.
They come in pairs. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And you can't totally separate them. So our first and fourth function in the car model, the driver and the 3-year-old, this is what John calls the axis of relating to self. And the second and third functions, the auxiliary, tertiary, or in the car model, what we call the co-pilot and the 10-year-old, is the axis of relating to others. That means that we, without even realizing it, whenever we're calling upon or a situation asks of us to be in our first and fourth, our dominant, inferior, driver, and 3-year-olds, that polarity, we assume the world will meet us where we're at on that.
Yeah.
That's our relationship to ourself. And so we try to bring everything on our terms. And we might not be aware of it. We just assume that those are our functions for us, and everybody's got to meet us where we're at when it comes to those functions.
By the way, just a quick link if you want to follow along, personalityhacker.com/car model will showcase these 4 functions in a general way. It's unique to your type. So like an owner's manual for your type would tell you what it does for your personality, but this would give you the framework to follow along with what Antonia is talking about.
Right. Then on the other side, the co-pilot 10-year-old, or auxiliary and tertiary, this is the axis of relating to others. So in the same way that we instinctively try to bring the world into meeting us where we're at with the driver and 3-year-old, we do the opposite with the co-pilot and the 10-year-old, or the auxiliary tertiary. These are functions that we actually meet the world where it's at.
Yeah.
We go all the way to meet other people when we bring these energies in.
And almost hard to make it come inwardly to us.
That's right.
Like it really is hard. Our reflex is to always go outward with it.
That's right. And sometimes we're waiting for other people to activate it sometimes, right? Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why, like, the sort of the trope of personality hacker is grow the co-pilot. Like, what we're really saying is stop only using it reflexively for other people. Start using it for the self. Okay. So that's the setup. The setup is that we have a dominant driver function that is associated or aligned with hero energy. It's a hero archetype.
Yeah.
And that hero is part of the axis of relating to self, meaning that we think that the world should bring everything to us on our terms when we're in the hero energy.
So if somebody's watching or listening right now, you're watching or listening right now, and this maybe you're a little new to type, it can get a little confusing at this part because it sounds almost, Antonia, like you're talking about maybe extroversion or introversion. I just want to make sure that that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about our relation to self or relation to others.
Right.
You could have an extroverted hero. I do. I have exploration, extroverted intuition. You could be an ETJ, for example, have extroverted thinking or effectiveness, extroverted feeling or harmony, extroverted sensing or sensation as your driver. And it still is the way, like it is how you engage with the outer world, but it's kind of for yourself.
Well,
right?
let's use this illustratively with our relationship, because we're fundamentally talking about relationships, right? Okay, so you have ENFP preferences and I have ENTP preferences. That means both of us have the same driver or dominant function of extroverted intuition or exploration. You mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast.
Absolutely.
So just like the client or the person you were talking to was like, you guys must have a great relationship because you share the same function. Well, here's the rub. This is a hero function for both of us.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that's right. So we both use it heroically, meaning that, like, oh, this is the right tool for all the jobs, which both of us are going to immediately jump to extroverted intuition or exploration anytime we're trying to problem solve or do anything. But you're using it heroically and I'm using it heroically, and both of us assume that the world should be meeting us where we're at when we bring this energy. So if we're using it in any different way, we're now in a power struggle, right?
Yeah.
Why aren't you meeting me on my extroverted intuition terms? I'll think. And you'll think, well, why aren't you meeting me on my extroverted intuition terms?
So I bet somebody listening right now, we're watching, guess where the biggest conflicts come
Yeah.
in our relationship? Is it when we're in the kitchen trying to make a meal? Is it when we're trying to get directions somewhere and make decisions? Is it deciding what to eat that night for dinner? No, it's in the office when we're trying to do a whiteboard session of creative ideas.
That's right. When we're brainstorming.
And I go, okay, here's my idea. And then you go, but here's my idea. And then but I need to go this direction, but I need to go this. It's almost like we're battling who gets to set the framework for this yes and possibility session.
Yep. Well, and for those of you that are type geeks, you can add one more layer in here that each of the functions has an analytic or a holistic orientation. And we've done podcasts on that before as well. You have more analytic or assertive extroverted intuition, and I have more holistic extroverted intuition or more receptive. So oftentimes I'm accusing you of steamrolling me, like
not letting my ideas come forward.
I want it to be more collaborative.
They're all just
and
accusations.
Open.
It's not true.
It's not true.
They're all just made up.
I'm like, you just want to tell me all your ideas. You don't want to collaborate. And you're like, I just need you to hear them. I've been bottlenecking them for a while. So, I mean, it's actually taken years for us to figure out this dance. And I think we're just kind of starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's taken a very long time. But I do know that when we're in brainstorming sessions, and probably because we have a personal relationship, we're in a power struggle.
Yeah.
And that creates conflict because you should be meeting me on my terms. We should be doing extroverted intuition or exploration my way. I just assume that. It's an assumption I bring in. Like, why aren't we doing it my way? Like, this is how it works.
I'm the hero here.
I'm the hero.
Let's do it heroically. I can lead us to the promised land.
I can lead us to
I
the
am
promised
the hero.
land.
Follow me.
Yep.
And I'm going, no, I'm the hero here.
Right.
I will lead us to the promised land. Why don't you follow me?
Yep.
So this, I think this is where, and there are things we get along with on this too.
Of course.
I mean, it is part of the magic of what we bring as well, because we're able to do the podcast with very little planning, very little notes.
That's right.
And often kind of know where each other's going to go with something. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but I think it usually does.
We perform very well. We have a really good rhythm and routine. We perform on stage well. And we both are up for anything.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, I want to go do this thing. And I'm like, let's go do it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how often have you gone, oh, hey, there's this big thing that's happening in 2 hours. So let's just rearrange our entire day to make it happen. Happened yesterday. And I'm like, all right, let's go do it. So in a lot of ways, I mean, can you imagine if you were somebody who's like, oh, I've got my day planned. I can't go do it last minute.
You should have told me 6 months ago,
You should have
Joel.
told me 6 months ago. You'd be like, oh, right. So in that way, we get along really well. Right. We live life very well together, but we also end up in power struggles. So this is important to know. Whatever your driver or dominant function is, you have a heroic relationship to it. You're going to bring it to the relationship, assuming, or your partnership, you're going to assume that your partner will be abdicating to the authority and the supremacy, one could argue, of that first function. If you share it, you might be getting into power struggles if you have the same one. But even if you don't, anytime your partner goes, no, that's not how we do things, you're going to be like, yeah, it is. And you're in a power struggle still, right? So it's going to be hard to not find yourself in power struggles when it comes to your first function.
So I guess one of the things, I mean, as much as we can land on this episode is to watch for where the power struggle is coming from. So if you can see it in this heroic energy, like just isolating where it's coming from might be a good starting place for somebody, just to see where the conflict is arising. And so is it a heroic element in your relationship?
Yeah. Do you think you're coming in with the solutions? Right. And if your solutions are rejected, then oftentimes it feels like a rejection of self.
If you're looking at the car model, there's so there's 4 boxes. It's a quadrant. On the left side, we have the driver in the driving position, the dominant energy, and then behind it is the 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's useful now to talk about the axis relating to others, or should we stay with the axis relating to self and go to the 3-year-old or inferior function and talk about that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you think that's better than jumping track? Okay, so let's stay with this polarity. Remember, these functions come in pairs. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at your car model for your personality type, again, you can find this information over Personality Hacker. you'll notice that your driver is the polarity opposite energy of your 3-year-old or inferior, right? So if your driver is extroverted, your 3-year-old is going to be introverted. If your driver is sensation, then your 3-year-old will be intuition. Like whatever the opposite of the driver would be is going to be your 3-year-old. This is a place that's deeply uncertain, right? We call it a 3-year-old because that's about the certainty level it has. The technical name is inferior. Let's talk about what John Beebe calls it. How does he apply archetypical energy here?
So John calls it the anima or the animus, depending upon what gender you prefer, and it's the opposite gender. So I would have an animus for my introverted sensing or memory. That's mine. And you would have an anima energy associated with yours. And there's a lot of Jungian theory that comes into what the anima is or the animus and all that. But I guess an easy way of saying it is that it's a part of us that we can become really intimate with. Like it's a part of ourselves that we can, the word is integrate or make more of who we are, but it never 100% quite feels like us.
Yeah.
It feels like a part of us without being us, unlike the hero, which feels like us, right? If somebody asks you to describe yourself, you're going to spend a lot of time describing your first function.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know type. We won't do that with our 3-year-old or inferior. It feels like we other it. Does that make sense? Kind of like we other the opposite gender. And so there's like an othering relationship we have. But it's still an important part of who we are, and it still shows up, and it's still part of that axis of relating to self.
Yeah, so I was going to say, if it's part of axis relating to self, it's deeply uncertain. It means that, again, relating to self, if I relate with this part of me to others, they can't really help me much, and they can functionally help me to do the activities that this function maybe would help me do, but they can't help me feel better about it.
Right.
They can't give me enough approval in this function or this area of my life or this archetypical energy to make me feel good, because it has to be validated from within.
That's
because
right.
It's my axis relating to self.
Yep.
Even if it's an extroverted function. Let's say you're an ITP and you have extroverted feeling or harmony. So this is a function that's attuned to the needs of others and the social frameworks and what is vibing and going on for other people. Now, you're going to be deeply uncertain. It's a part of you. You can resonate with it and kind of pick it up when you see it sometimes. It's not always going to be obvious to you, and you're going to be deeply uncertain when you're here.
Yeah.
And I could say, you're doing a great job. You're doing fantastic. Don't worry. People like you. You're not caught. But that uncertainty, it like everybody could tell you you're doing a great job. The whole world could tell you, and you're going to still say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're all wrong. It's only from the self that you can soothe this uncertainty and you're never going to soothe it fully. It's almost like making peace with it.
Yeah.
And we also talk about in our personal life path mentorship, when you make peace with this part of yourself, it unlocks the gate to the shadow, right? And now we have access to shadow material to work with.
Yep.
But it starts here at the 3-year-old inferior function.
Yeah. So that, because it's like you mentioned, because it's the axis of relating to self, one way that manifests is that we can't gain comfort from others.
Yeah.
That, like you said, that we're doing a good job or that we're doing enough.
No soothing.
Right. Exactly. It's deeply uncertain because it doesn't take feedback. So, but like, I think that's a great example though. Well, what if you're an ITP type, an extroverted feeling or harmony, which is all about rapport with other people,
Feedback,
right? Relationships and feedback and all that stuff, approval, disapproval. How could that be axis of relating to self? And so the first one is that you can't get feedback from others on how you're doing to gain comfort. And the second one is that you won't be pushed.
Yeah.
A big part of how the inferior or 3-year-old shows up as the relationship to self is I get to decide what level that I'm at. I get to decide how much I'm willing to push that. You watch an ITP that's not ready to socialize and try to force them to do so, right?
It's not happening.
Yeah, they're the immovable object.
Or an ETJ that you want to get into their emotional state. They're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No way. I'm compartmentalizing that. I'm not going there.
That's right.
Like, there's a little bit more control. Even there's uncertainty, there's like this rigidness, a gripping of it tightly.
Yeah, well, it's mine. I get to decide. And just like with the first function, we expect everybody to meet us on our terms.
Defer and honor it.
To defer and honor it. When it comes to the inferior, we expect everybody to meet us on our terms where we think we're at. Like, don't require more out of me than I think I can give you. I need the world to meet me at my level of proficiency, even if that's not very high. Like, why are you making me do this? Why are you forcing me to perform higher where I don't think I'm capable of it? So that's the other way that it's axis of relating to self. We think that the world should meet us where we're at.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk now about the axis relating to others. Let's jump to the other side, unless you've got more to say about this part.
Well, I want to, again, just like we did with the first function, how is this going to show up in a relationship or a partnership?
Yeah.
In that first one, it's like, well, there's potential power struggles or an expectation of deference there. And if your partner isn't deferring to your first function, then you're going to almost take that as an insult. You're going to go, well, this is my terrain. This is what we do. The same is for the inferior. If they have, or 3-year-old function, if your partner has expectations for you that are higher than you have for yourself here, then you're going to dig your heels in. This could also be a source of arguments. Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you making this happen? Why can't you get this handled? Why are you showing up in this way? Right? Like there's going to be a bunch of maybe like they bring in this idea that you should be much better in this arena of life.
Yeah.
And you're not going to feel bad that you're not. You're not going to be like, like, yeah, you're right, I should get better. You're going to dig your heels in and be like, why do you need me to do all this stuff? Yeah.
This actually happens with my parents. So my dad has ISFP preferences. So he's got effectiveness or, extroverted thinking as his 3-year-old. He does a pretty good job. They've built a nonprofit that does fairly well for 50 years now. In a couple of years, they're 48 years doing this. So he does fairly well for being, and my mom works with him too as an INFJ. So he's okay with it, but I've noticed that he has to simplify all systems down to the level of his extroverted thinking or effectiveness. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when I was working with him as a young person, trying to, and my mom would want this too, and there was some relational challenge there. It's like, we could set up a little bit more sophisticated, donor system for tracking donors, for example, like a software. But unless he knew how to operate it at the most simple level, he didn't want anything else complex that would require other people to operate it that his extroverted thinking couldn't handle. Mm-hmm. So he kept the system small, which throttled growth ultimately, because he wanted to make sure that he could handle anything in case somebody, he was uncertain about his delegation ability too, or holding staff or resource long-term. So as long as he could operate it, it was always okay. So he always diminished things down to the level of operation. So in a relationship, this could be happening, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody could want to bring down the thing that is their 3-year-old or inferior to the level that they can engage with it for other reasons than my father would.
Yeah.
To ensure that it doesn't get out of hand. But then the other partner's like, but I could do something way more sophisticated than this. Like our household could be set up way better if you'd let me, but the partner doesn't want to because they can't reconcile. They wouldn't have any power in that dynamic. They would feel out of control or like it's too much for them or uncertain.
Yeah.
So they diminish it down to what they can handle or control. Yeah. I think this happens with couples all the time.
Yeah.
It's happening back and forth with each person.
Yep.
Right. Without us knowing it.
Yeah. I think of it in all sorts of ways. Like, why aren't you sharing your feelings with me? Feeling 3-year-old, right? Yeah. Or why aren't you getting more done? Or why aren't you, why
aren't you more connective? Or
why aren't you more connected? We both have introverted sensing or memory as our 3-year-old or inferior. And again, the flavor is different. So some of the things you panic about with that function, I'm not, but I'm panicking about things you're not panicking about, right? And fortunately, we, at least in that arena, we kind of leave each other alone because we get it. We're like, but at the same time, there's a part of me that wishes that you could help me with routines better. Like, I'm like, why aren't you helping me, be accountable to routines more? Like, we could get this handled, but I also know that you're not gonna, right? And so fortunately, I know enough about type to not resent you for it. But let's say I didn't. Let's say I didn't know about type and I was just like, no, this is my blind spot. This is my weakness. It shouldn't be yours. You should be better at helping me with this. So there's also going to be a little bit of, do this for me. Help me in this, as opposed to, and then the person's like, no, you should be doing it on your own. You're an adult. And now you've got that problem. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different ways that requiring the person to meet you on your terms when it comes to your 3-year-old or inferior can really be a problem.
Yeah. Now are we ready to move over to the axis relating to others?
I am.
Let's do it.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the co-pilot and 10-year-old. Again, looking at the car model, personality.com/car model. Yeah. You can look at this this chart here to follow along with us and also get an owner's manual for your type. That's a better way to do it because you go deeper into it. So let's talk about this. The co-pilot and 10-year-old. Axis relating to others. These two, so whatever your personality type is, your co-pilot is going to be the polarity opposite of your 10-year-old. And they come as a pair. So whatever it is for you in your personality. So what the archetypical energy here at the Copilot is parental.
Mm-hmm.
John Beebe talks about this parental energy we carry here. And parental energy wants to parent and guide and discipline and correct and frame and help out. Like
And
genuinely wants the growth of something that's, younger, and it wants it to flourish and be successful in the world.
Yep.
This is the desire of this energy. Let's talk a little bit about axis of relating to others, though, which would make sense for parental energy to want to be focused outwardly.
Yeah. So the way that this shows up, this parental energy, is that, oftentimes people are waiting for the outside world to spark it. Yeah. That's how it's part of the axis of relating to others, is that we're waiting for a need to come up that we feel like this part of us is the right tool for the job. And the reason why we always mention develop the Copilot is what we're really saying is self-parent, right? Like use this function for self-parenting. And again, the self-love podcast, we went into what that means to self-parent and set better expectations. But the real challenge here is that not only are we waiting for the outside world to ping it, right, to activate it for us, but we also have a tendency to meet the world all the way where it's at without necessarily setting terms on our own. And this is a challenge that parents do a lot, right? Letting sort of the kid determine when you're going to parent. Like it's like reactive parenting as opposed to proactive parenting.
Or doing it for them, maybe. Like
or doing it for them.
Over-parenting. Like, well, I don't want you to have to do this on your own. I'll just do it for you to make it easier.
That's right.
You don't let them struggle or figure it out, right? Yep. You're over-helping.
Yep, you got it. And so there's a bunch of theory that goes behind, like, how do you become a good parent, and how do you how do you self-parent well? But in a relationship, it means that we might be handing over too much power to our partner when it comes to this part of us. And it might feel thankless, because parenting is thankless. It's like, we've mentioned this in previous podcasts, but the job of parenting is to, like, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and wake up at all times of the middle of the night to help your child in a variety of contexts, and then
for them to tell you, screw you, mom and dad, and like 15 years old.
That's right. And then become teenagers and become, like get into all sorts of trouble and tell you that you don't know what you're talking about. And then maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky and they grow up and have kids of their own, they might at some point go, you know what? Hey, thanks for raising me.
Right before you die.
Right.
You'll hear this message on your deathbed.
That's right.
Thanks, mom or dad, for all that hard work.
And somehow that made it all worth it, right? It's like, well, you're a carrier of my genes, so I guess my DNA at least is being spread.
We clearly don't do it for the rewards.
Right.
Like the direct rewards or gratitude. We do it for other reasons.
That's right.
Right? As parents.
And we don't expect a lot back. So in this part of who we are in a partnership, we might be giving maybe even more than we can. We might be meeting our partner all the way where they're at. And then kind of feeling like they're not grateful, like kind of taking advantage of us, even though we don't expect much back. So that's not part of the terms of service. But the expectation that we carry, the assumption we carry, is that we're not allowed to set boundaries here. Just like is a parent allowed to set boundaries with children? That's kind of a sticky subject. And it's like, of course they are, but it changes, right? And if you're treating your partner like they're a child, a little kid, you're not going to set a lot of boundaries, right? Because you're going to be like, no, I need to just keep giving and giving and giving. And then you kind of feel like they're taking advantage of you because they're not actual literal children. They're an adult. They're your peer. So that's one of the biggest challenges with this being parental energy and the axis of relating to others, is we might be giving too much away.
Give something away, but also there's this piece in parental energy where you might have an unconscious assumption that your partner is going to be as sophisticated at your parental energy as you are. We had a client who had an INFJ wife, and he said, is it common? Like, he was asking about extroverted feeling or harmony. So an INFJ would have harmony as their co-pilot, or this parental energy. And he basically was reporting that his wife will, with her harmony, commit to things in the community. Like, I want to help out here in this community center, and I want to support the kids in the town this way, and like very focused with that parental energy to go out and parent in the community, which is a value and it's good. And I'm not criticizing that at all. He was lamenting. He said, but she assumes that I'm also going to be in on this. Like
Right.
almost like, oh, and you're going to be helping me. Almost
Right.
like you have as much a desire to parent in the same way that I do.
Yeah.
It's just an assumption, and
Yeah.
she doesn't mean anything by it. It's so obvious to her that that's what you do with this energy. You parent into the world with it, right? And so I think that's like the way it might show up in a partnership is, somebody's doing what's obvious to them and assuming their partner is going to think in the same way. Like, this is what we do. This is what we give to the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a couple, it's like, no, that's what you give to the world because that's your parental energy. It's not mine. I mean, and again, it could be a source of conflict with couples.
Yeah. 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 I see there being quite a few potential traps here.
Yeah.
One of them is feeling like your partner is not grateful for all that you do with this function. And then also signing everybody up for things.
Yeah.
Going like, hey, this is what we do, right? Like assuming everybody's going to be as good as you are.
Yeah.
And so that could definitely, well, I mean, as in like you said, facing the world, right? We give this to the world. So all of us do that, right? Like we're all supposed to be giving this out. And that's part of how it's the axis of relating to others. Yeah, absolutely. So on the other side of that polarity is the 10-year-old. So in the car model, it goes from co-pilot down to 10-year-old. And the 10-year-old or tertiary is our eternal child energy. That's what's associated with that part of us. And it's the axis of relating to others. So we look outward, we meet the world with this energy. An eternal child energy, basically, I mean, the easiest way to see this is our approval center. This is how we try to show up to gain other people's kudos and think we're great. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think I've met anybody yet that hasn't told me that they're better at their 10-year-old or tertiary than most people. I think I seriously don't know if I've met a single person that has not claimed to be better at this function than, I mean, most people are my type. They're that great at this function, but I'm good at this function.
Even if they know type.
If they know type. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and this is something we do in our personality profiler training is a lot of people will report this part of themselves in a profiling session. Mm-hmm. So we teach our students to look for that because it'll throw you off. You'll think it's the driver sometimes.
Yeah, because
that's how much they put it forward.
Facing it so much.
Oh, yeah, and they need the feedback. So it's like constantly on mind, constantly put to the forefront, constantly like, see what I can do, see what I can do. It's like, don't get tricked. That may not be their driver process you're seeing in a session.
Yep. You got it. And it's a bit of a dog and pony show. So there's a couple ways that this can show up in a relationship that really that can create tension in a partnership. So the first thing I can think of is feeling like your partner is not honoring this, like not giving you enough approval, right? I'm doing all these things, unlike the parental energy that can go, and then eventually be like, oh, you're not, why don't you show gratitude? I feel used, right? You might feel used in this part of who you are if it's parental. If it's eternal child, you need a lot more feedback on a regular basis. You're like seeking approval hits on all the time.
Yeah.
And so if your partner is not giving you due credit, then that might become a source of a problem, right? It's like, no, I need more credit for this. It is still a 10-year-old or tertiary function. It's still an uncertain function. And so you're probably not as good at it as you think you are. So you might be seeking unearned rewards. Does that make sense? And so your partner might not be giving you the kudos you want them to because you actually haven't earned it. It's like you might be doing, in fact, too much. And it also might be a part of yourself that they see as immature, right? Like, why are you always doing this? Why are you always, going to, you're doing too much. Why are you always giving the farm away? Why are you overly generous? Why are you spending all your time and energy on your friends? Why are you whatever it is, whatever the problem is, it may be found in this function's desire to get feedback from the outside world that helps it feel like it's doing okay. It does overdo it. That's one of the biggest challenges of this part of us. And when people say, I'm better at it than most, what they're actually saying is, I'm using it all the time, right? And so because I see myself using it all the time, the assumption is I must be good. But what most people don't see is that they're using it all the time in order to get positive feedback. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're upping their game. They're usually using it at max capacity which is more than they would have expected from themselves. But that doesn't mean that it's enough to generate the kind of kudos or approval they're looking for from the outside world. And it almost always leads to some form of burnout. So this is there's a theory that indicates that a lot of our neurosis are actually sourced from this part of who we are. This is the part where we get a little neurotic. And because of that, that can create some strain in a relationship.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, I want to kind of hunt for the dynamic of what that could actually look like in a very pragmatic way, like a very visceral way.
Well, I mean, using us again as an example, because
it's the closest one.
It's right here, right? And it also means that we don't reveal other people's relationships. So let's just talk about us. I've noticed that this creates the most strain when we believe that the other person is trying to frustrate our impact. So if you think that I'm getting in the way of you being able to use extroverted thinking or effectiveness, which is your 10-year-old or tertiary, if you think that I'm frustrating your ability to make impact in any way, that is when you get the most upset with me. And the same thing with me. If I think that you're frustrating my ability to do extroverted feeling or harmony, like maintain harmonious relationships, that's when I'm the most upset and frustrated with you. So when we're frustrating our attempts to use it, and sometimes we're doing it inappropriately. Like, I mean, just radically honest, sometimes you are like, you overwork. You just do, right? Like sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you're like,
wait to tell me on the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, this is a conversation we have all the time, so whatever. But it's like, it's like, why are you working until 10 o'clock at night? Why are you overdoing it? Why are you spreading yourself so thin?
Yes.
Why do you blah, 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 blah? And you're like, and now you're upset with me because I'm frustrating your attempts to do extroverted thinking or effectiveness well.
Yeah.
Same thing on the other side. I'm sometimes people pleasing and kowtowing in an inappropriate way. And you're like, why are you giving your power away? Why are you doing that? That doesn't, and I'm like, I'm mad that you're getting in the way of me being able to form the relationships I want. And so, or like do it maybe not in the best way.
Yeah.
And so we observe each other's immaturity in this part. And then we call it out, and then the other person gets real salty about that. It's like, but you're getting in my way of making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very clear example of this that happened between the two of us. It's a scene that illustrates this perfectly. We're on the way to New York City to meet a friend / business partner. I think I've shared this story on the podcast probably years ago.
Because it's burned in your brain. I always forget about it.
But it's such a great example of this. We're running late. We're on the trains going to New York City, trying to get to this dinner at a location. And we're running late and we miss our exit. And I'm stressing out because I want to be on a timeline. I want to get this job done. I want to get us to the event. I want to have this business meeting and this connection. And I know that we have a time clock that, the person won't be able to bring their wife and their child if we don't, they'll meet with us alone, but we're going to miss this window very soon. So I'm like, moving. We missed our exit. We finally get to the place we need to go. We still have to walk like 2 blocks. And you're dressed nicely. We have one of our team members with us and me. We're both dressed up. You're in heels. And we're kind of like, so it's slow because you're walking. I'm like, okay, we gotta keep moving. And I've got this timeline. I've got this goal and this thing we have to accomplish. We're in New York City and you look over and you see one of the hot dog guy push cart things, like stuck in a mud puddle on the side of the street, like trying to get it up over the side of the thing.
Lip.
And you're like, I need to go help. I'm like, don't go help. That guy does this every day. Somebody else can help. There's a city filled with 8 million people. Like, it's not going to be dependent on you, Antonia. Let's get to the restaurant. Come on, let's go. And you're like, no. And you go over and you step down in the puddle. You get your feet like dirty and wet. And you're like next to this guy trying to push this out. And it becomes very clearly apparent. This is not going to be a quick fix. This is a project now, right? This is like no longer a task. It's now a project with many steps in it because you're going to have to move. Like a lot of stuff's going to happen. But you're like, you're trying as hard as you can. And I haven't tried to help you. I'm like, oh, come on. And then finally, I don't know what happened, if you guys got it loose or you moved it around. But here you're seeing a person in need. Right? It's activating that harmony process.
That's right.
And you're like, priority number 1, like there's a person in need. Why wouldn't I want to help? Like, I know that we got a timeline, but there's a need here that trumps the timeline. You might be on a timeline, Joel, but your system's there. And I'm sitting here going, we're on a timeline. There's 1 million people or 8 million people that can help this guy. It doesn't have to be you, Antonia, but we do have to get to this business dinner that we've already committed to. And so we had this conflict right in the moment.
Battle of
and
our
I'm frustrated with you. And
children.
then we argue all the way to the dinner, after the dinner about it. Right? I think we even argued like months later about it. It's like both, like I probably have more heat about it than you do. But I think that's a good example of, we're talking about these things like, and you might have these unhealthy relationships and somebody else but also it's your experience as a couple in these moments, these scenes you have, and you're just like, what is going on? Why is this person trying to harm me and prevent the thing? Can't they clearly see what needs to happen?
Yeah.
You would say that. Can't Joel see clearly this guy needs help? He's standing right here and sees another human being in need. He lacks compassion. Cannot he not see that? And I'm standing on the other side, like I'm on the sidewalk going, can't Antonia understand that we're already late? She's been on the train with me. She missed the exit with me. Why is she doing this? Why is she so obtuse? And both of us have our perspective there, and we're in conflict around it.
And we're trying to gain approval for that childlike energy. Your approval was waiting for you at the dinner.
Yeah.
For being there on time, being responsible.
user, by the way.
Who was in?
I'm going to be like, I'm going to be embarrassed and humiliated because they're going to be like, where were you?
ENTJ preferences. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm so humiliated that I'm going to be late for this.
That's right.
Extroverted thinking is just humiliated, and you're making it worse.
That's right. Whereas me, I would be humiliated to just walk by the guy.
Yeah.
That would be a humiliation to my extroverted feeling or harmony. I would feel like an asshole. I'd be like, I'm a terrible person.
Yes.
And so it was a perfect example of a clashing of our eternal child energies.
Yeah.
And there's uncertainty in there. That's part of the agitation. That's like I'm like, am I a bad person if I just walk by this guy? And you're like, am I a loser if I show up a little bit late or later than even we're gonna be? So there's uncertainty in there. There's frustration. There's a lot of victim language. Like both of us felt like we were victims to each other. Man, I wonder how often that's happening in partnerships.
Oh, yeah,
in
I think
relationships, all the time.
But these eternal child's energies are looking for that approval, and they're like desperate.
Yeah,
we're reading as our partner maybe in a whole different. Maybe we read it badly, but it's like, oh wait, this is just a childlike part that just needs approval right now. Validation.
Yep.
You're okay. And so I think even there, as you're looking through your car model and your partner's car model, I think you can start to see, okay, where is the conflict happening?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the first steps in a couple's mapping of your personality types. Is just, can we figure out, is it my 10-year-old eternal child in conflict with your heroic energy? Are they in conflict with each other? Or is it just both of our 10-year-olds are kind of in a conflict with each other?
Yeah.
Or multiple are in conflict with multiple of parts of you?
Yeah, am I handing over power to my partner when I shouldn't be, or am I taking power where I shouldn't? What are the assumptions I'm just entering the dynamic with? And again, it's a systems problem. It's not, it's most things aren't a people problem. Most things are a systems problem. And if you take a person and break it down to its system, like, is it really truly that I wanted to frustrate you by helping this hot dog vendor out, right? Like, I was really going to get Joel and stick it to him, right? Or and were you trying to make me feel like a terrible person by just walking by? No, obviously not. Like, we had no ill intent towards each other at all. It wasn't a people problem. It was a system problem, that there was a part of us, part of the system inside of us that was compelled to act. These were parts of us that almost we couldn't decide. Like, they were deciding for us.
Yeah.
That's how the system is set up. Now, we're a lot more savvy about that. We're a lot more aware and attuned. And so we watch for those kinds of things now, but only because we have language for it. Otherwise, that particular dynamic would probably show up in our relationship over and over and over again until the day we died, if we didn't understand what was going on.
Yes.
And so I think that's why being able to go, oh, okay, so these are the assumptions, the expectations, these are the energies that are happening inside of me. We actually can't control the pre-wiring. We can't control the black box is set up, right? Like, how we are set up is, to some extent, a lot of that is predetermined. But what we can do is we can take the black box and we can program it, right? And so I'm just always going to have these functions in those positions associated with those archetypal energies, and handing power away or taking power. Like, that's just how the system's set up. But if I'm aware of that, I won't make it your problem. Or if I am making it your problem, I can realize that quickly and then reverse course. And that's the whole point of using type in relationships, is going, well, I'm not going to change some of these DNA level construction, substrates of my personality construction. But I don't have to change them. I don't have to change the hardware, I can update the software, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why just being able to map it out in front of you is really powerful.
I mean, speaking of mapping it out, I'm going to talk about our couples mapping program, personality types and relationships.
Well, you should.
I think it's one of the best programs we've ever created.
I agree.
It doesn't, like, we don't put a lot of attention to it because I think we're just so focused on our personality life path mentorship because it's such a deep program and it's about shadow work. And so this one's more about mapping a relationship with your partner or on your own, just mapping your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be applied to other types of intimate relationships as well, not just, partnerships romantically. You could do parental child or other types of relationships, I think, in this dynamic.
That's a really good point, because even though the context of it is romantic relationship, I think that it's a very powerful program for any one-to-one.
Yeah.
Anytime you have an intimate relationship with another person, whether it's romantic or not, I think couples mapping is a great way of helping diagnose some of the bigger challenges, including parent-child, sibling,
Yeah.
good friends.
So we designed it. Every program we design, we try to either have an operational component to it, like our personality profiling is you can do a profiling session. Life path, it's like operationally digging up some challenge of your shadow and creating a systems map and a pathway forward. In the couples mapping, it's designed to create a couples map. That's the takeaway, right? That's the tool you have at the end of the program, and the program's designed for you to build that couples map. And you could do it without your partner if you had to on just one side of that. But basically, it's a nice tool to have and go, okay, maybe you could get as good at doing it in real time on the streets of New York when your partner goes and helps the hot dog person. But you could basically kind of go, oh, wait, okay, so my partner has extroverted feeling or harmony as their 10-year-old, that eternal child part of themselves. Well, no wonder they're always looking to give in those moments, like we're walking down the streets in New York City. Okay, that makes sense. And no wonder my eternal child, if I look on this couples map, that's extroverted thinking or effectiveness. Well, no wonder I'm very focused on getting to the event at time and the business meeting. And I'm going to feel a little embarrassed about the person judging me around my ability to get us there. And I feel like I have to lead it all and make sure it happens. Well, no wonder we had conflict on the streets of New York that day.
Yep.
I wonder where else that's happening. And so we start to pay attention to the map. And it's almost like we have this diagnostic tool that we can now reference back to before, during, and after conflict. And we can start to see things emerge. Behaviors come from that and know which part of us is in conflict with our partner or person that we're in a relationship with, whether it's friend or family, Yep. So I think it's a fantastic program. It comes with 2 owner's manuals that are also programs in their own right, courses in their own right, going deep into each individual type. So you pick which one for you and your partner. And again, if you're just one-sided, I think a lot of people don't realize that this is designed so you could just go through it on your own and map your partnership.
Yeah.
So
powerfully.
I just wanted to bring attention to it because, and I would also bring attention to the owner's manuals themselves of your personality, because some of the things we talked about, the car model today, there's a lot here, and there's a lot you can go down into things like how do you build a life around being in your flow state, ergonomically designed for how your personality type is. Like, what are the things you'd want to put in a day-to-day level, building your ideal day for how you're wired, how you learn information, make decisions. Talks about things like getting stuck in a grip where you're that 3-year-old grips you and prevents you from getting the results you want or the optimizations in life. There's this idea of trauma looping, where you're kind of in a trauma looping situation for specific to your personality. There's 3 different styles of trauma looping. We talk about it in there too, and how to get out of those. And then we talk about that co-pilot and all the growth state there. I mean, it's just a great program, and we keep adding to it topically and everything. So again, I would recommend either couples mapping, if you're interested in some of the stuff we did where we're mapping relationships, or those owner's manuals just for yourself, or even, partnership. You can do it on your own without couples mapping, but I think it takes the 2 owner's manuals that come with couples mapping. It makes it really a clear map of your relational dynamics. Let's put it that way.
Yep, you got it.
So in addition to that, while you're over at personalityhacker.com, picking up a copy of couples mapping or your owner's manual course for your type, after you do that, navigate over to this podcast, and directly below this episode, we'd love to hear from you. You haven't had a microphone. It's been myself and Antonia, but you've been here as part of the conversation. I'm sure thoughts, ideas, emotions, different questions might be coming up for you. We want to hear your voice. The best place to do that is under this podcast in the comments. Leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your stories. Stories are compressed experiences. And get to know your relationship journey. What has your relationship dynamic been with the people in your life, intimately or friends and family? Do you see some of the things we've talked about showing up in your relationship? Maybe your partner has that hero similar to yours or different to yours. What's the dynamic there? What's the dynamic of the 3-year-old or the animus archetype energy? What's the co-pilot or parental energy? And what's the eternal child or 10-year-old energy for you and your partner? Like, how do these show up? Are you able to identify something that's showing up in conflict in your relationship? We would love to hear about it to see how it shows up in real relationships and making this real in your life.
Yep. And if you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on a variety of platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, plenty of places. And if you'd leave a rating and review, if you do enjoy the show, if you leave a rating and review, particularly on Apple Podcasts, that's part of the juice that keeps us going. You might also be watching us on YouTube right now because we have a video podcast. So we highly recommend you go check that out. You can like, subscribe, and hit the bell to let you know when future episodes come out. And I agree with Joel. Go get couples mapping. It's a great program. We poured a lot into it, and I think it's a great time to pick up a copy, whether you're in a relationship or you're just preparing to be one in the future.
Yeah. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.